The Chicago Bears won their final preseason game against the Kansas City Chiefs, but it felt like a loss and a wake-up call for the starters on both sides of the ball.
You are Locked On Bears, your daily Chicago Bears podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This is Locked On Bears, and I'm your host, Lauren Cox. I'm here to bring you your daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. You can follow me on Twitter at CoxSports1, and you can follow the podcast at Locked On Bears on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and the Locked On Bears YouTube channel, where you can keep up with all of our video podcasts as well. Thanks for making Locked On Bears your first listen today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And on the show today, we're going to go over the Bears' loss to the Chiefs on Friday night, including why things looked and felt so bad, and how it felt like some sort of crashing back down to earth, back to reality, that maybe this team still has a little bit more work to do than the confidence we got from the second preseason game against the Buffalo Bills. But I also want to make sure we don't overreact too strongly to this as well and feel like, hey, actually, there's more to it than what we saw on the field. And this is still a preseason game, and there are some real explanations as to why things maybe didn't go so well. And then we'll wrap up with a first look at the 53-man roster and some of the early moves the Bears are making to trim it down, and how this game against the Chiefs might help shape that final roster a little bit more. But boy, it felt like as ugly of a start of a preseason game with the starters as you could imagine. I mean, from the very first play, right? The turnaround fumble, and then immediately follow that up with a false start, and then you're in second and long, and it just never really, for the starters, it didn't really get much better from there until, at the end of the first half, when they finally got something going before halftime there. But it just felt like at so many levels, it looked bad and felt like a team that didn't look ready for regular season play. They didn't look ready and sharp and dialed in, firing on all cylinders for week one. It looked like a group that had a long way to go. And I liked that this game, we got to see it from the defense too. I mean, I didn't like that it was so bad, but the first preseason game against the Bills, the starting defense was on the field for 3 plays. We never really got a good chance to see how good or bad that group looked the first time around. The offense looked great, but we didn't really see the starting defense much at all in the second preseason game. And now we got to lump the defense in with the offense here of that group doesn't look ready to go either. I mean, Nahshon Wright, the cornerback opposite Tyreek Stevenson, did not look like a starting caliber NFL cornerback in this game. He was late in reacting on coverage. He was bad at containing the run on the edge. I mean, he was just pretty rough out there. And I think as soon as Jalen Johnson's healthy, it's pretty clear who's going to be the first cornerback moving to the bench, and it's Nahshon Wright. Not that Tyreek Stevenson had some good game either, but, at least there's some separation in that battle, but also some concerns about if Johnson's not ready to go week one and Nahshon Wright's going to be out there, he doesn't look like he's going to be able to hold up against Justin Jefferson, certainly, let alone what else the Minnesota Vikings end up throwing at him. I also was particularly disappointed in this game with Gervon Dexter. I thought he was particularly bad in moments of this game, not showing up much as a pass rusher. There were a time or two he got a little bit of the pocket collapsing a little bit, but in the running game, he was getting blown out of the water. There's a particular play near the goal line where he just was more willing to stand up and get blocked as opposed to really getting in there and being a disruptive force in there. So I just felt like almost like effort and energy collectively weren't where they needed to be. I mean, same thing on offense. There was a screenplay where DJ Moore was trying to set up a block for, I think, Olamide Zaccheaus they threw to, and DJ Moore didn't have much interest in actually blocking on that play, that he was just kind of willing to play patty cake with the cornerback. Well, even after the play is still going, he's kind of done blocking. It was definitely not a shining example of no block, no rock. It was not the kind of effort, energy, and dedication that you wanted to see from the team out there. And that's a concern, and also maybe a little bit partially why you don't want to overreact too strong here, right? Because it didn't seem like guys were necessarily going out. And like that's its own problem, but it wasn't like, wow, the Bears threw everything they had at the Kansas City Chiefs and they still got absolutely steamrolled in that regard. Because you saw the Chiefs drop a couple of passes there. It feels like it could have been even more one-sided early on because Caleb Williams just not able to get into a rhythm. He was holding on to the ball too long for a while there, took a sack, and really looked a lot like, in a lot of ways, the rookie year quarterback, like making some of those same mistakes again, rearing their ugly head. But then, eventually they get some things together and there's plenty of reason to still be encouraged. It's not like sky is falling and this team is going to be the worst team in the NFL. It's just like, hey, you got some real stuff to work on here. And silver lining is like, hey, it's a nice little wake-up call for whatever comfort and sense of confidence you were building after you beat up on the Bills. Like, welcome back to reality. Like, you still got a long way to go. And it's nice to get that now as opposed to cruising through the whole preseason thinking you've got everything figured out, and then you get to week 1 against the Vikings and you get shellacked, and it's like, oh, wake up, hello, welcome to the NFL. Like, no, it gets serious at that point. Like, I like that they were able to get that now so they can use the next 2 weeks to really sort of shape up and see the task that's in front of them as being maybe more than they initially thought, given the progress it seemed like they had made here. A couple other quick notes on defense before we move on. There was a play where Jaquan Brisker got juked by Travis Kelce, an old Travis Kelce. That didn't feel like great effort, energy, hustle, intensity there from him. Ruben Hippolyte took some bad angles. Noah Sewell just looked too slow in coverage a lot. Like it really sort of shattered some of this illusion of like everything looked great and everything looked fine. And it's not to say that everything is broken and not to be fixed, but there's some real work to do now. And this, I wonder how much it signals to general manager Ryan Poles as far as maybe you need to make some upgrades on the defensive line because the pass rush really wasn't affecting Mahomes nearly as much. Maybe you need to get somebody else in at linebacker because you don't have a lot of speed or proven talent in your depth chart there. Maybe you need more cornerback depth because Terrell Smith is on injured reserve and Deshaun Wright doesn't look very good and Jalen Johnson's hurt and Josh Blackwell's hurt. And maybe they look outside a little bit more and they say, maybe we aren't as good as we thought we might be. And I'll be curious to see over the next 24 hours and maybe as this podcast comes out at the Bears, and they made a couple of trades this time of the year last year before the 53-man roster cut down. We saw over the weekend, the Eagles made like 3 trades. The Packers were in one of those, but a bunch of teams making little like 7th-round picks for a guy you were going to cut type of deal. I'm curious if the Bears end up making any of those, or do they stick with the guys they got and say, no, we think that Chiefs game wasn't necessarily fully reflective of where we are as a team, and we trust in the talent of the coaching staff to be able to take that to the next level. Because at the end of the day, this was a preseason game, and the Bears weren't game planning for the Chiefs, and rarely do we see good or bad preseason game performances directly translate to what we then see in the regular season. It's not very predictive. So I want to take the other side of this and sort of like tone down the big reactions to this game and say, hey, wait a minute. Not that we should ignore it and say this is nothing to worry about, but maybe it's not as big of a deal on both sides of the ball. So we'll kind of check in on the other end of the spectrum here next on Locked On Bears. This episode of Locked On Bears is brought to you by Rugiet. Guys, you've probably heard of Viagra or Cialis. Maybe you've even tried them. But if you're looking for something beyond the usual pill, it's time to meet Rugiet Ready. Rugiet Ready is a next-gen prescription treatment designed to amplify arousal in the brain and boost blood flow. Unlike the usual pills that can take hours, Rugiet's 3-in-1 formula dissolves under your tongue and kicks in fast, on average in 15 minutes. And the effects can last up to 36 hours, so you can stay confident and in control whenever the moment is right. It's completely online, where Rugiet connects you with a board-certified doctor, and it ships your treatment directly and discreetly to your door. Head to Rugiet.com/LockedOnNFL and use our promo code LockedOnNFL to get 15% off today. That's Rugiet.com, Rugiet, Rugiet.com/LockedOnNFL, promo code LockedOnNFL for 15% off. Individual results may vary with prescription treatment. Compounded drugs are permitted to be prescribed under federal law, but are not FDA approved and do not undergo FDA safety, effectiveness, or manufacturing review. Visit the Rugiet website for full safety information. Locked On Bears is also brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. And coming up this week, tomorrow, August 26th, is officially FanDuel Futures Day, a brand new holiday for football fans who live for bold predictions and preseason hunches. For just 24 hours on August 26th, FanDuel is giving you deals on NFL season predictions. So whether you're calling your MVP, eyeing a long shot division winner, or ready to crown your Super Bowl champion before week one even begins, this is your moment. You could say, look at Ben Johnson as the favorite for Coach of the Year odds. Caleb Williams, obviously a bit of a long shot for MVP, if you want to call your shot, or the Bears to win the NFC North. You name it, they've got it all. And Tuesday, August 26th, is the day to make your bets. Visit the FanDuel app today and start planning your futures bets now, because Futures Day is one day and one day only, August 26th on FanDuel. Play your game. So this loss against the Chiefs was obviously disappointing in so many ways. And I'm not going to come on here and say, actually, don't worry about it. Everything's fine. Nothing to worry about here. Like, even though it was the preseason, you can't just dismiss it all and say, oh, well, preseason football, who cares? It means nothing. I don't think it means nothing. But I do think we shouldn't overreact and panic too much about a bad preseason game performance. I mean, first of all, the biggest picture, most obvious thing is, like, sometimes teams have bad games, and that doesn't mean they're going to play that bad every game. Just like some teams have great games, and doesn't mean they're going to play that great every game. Like, I think the reality of where the Chicago Bears are right now is probably somewhere in between the offense that carved up the Bills' backups and the offense that really struggled against the Chiefs starters. Like, they're probably not as bad as we saw against the Chiefs, probably not as great as we saw against the Bills. Like, on average, they're somewhere in the middle. And, like, they're allowed to have a bad game and not be that bad every single week. Like, that doesn't mean, like, oh no, they're going to play that terrible every single game. That in itself is not the strongest of the arguments, but it's something that I want to make sure we don't just, like, we sort of take for granted and assume, like, yeah, duh, but it's worth sort of saying and acknowledging that, yes, also one bad game is not a huge sample size to say everything is wrong and broken. But also, again, more broadly, it is the preseason. Like, Ben Johnson is using old Lions game plans. They're not putting in scouting reports on the Chiefs' cornerback tendencies and where they tend to align in coverage and what protections work well against their blitz packages, or vice versa, where to attack the Chiefs' offensive line, what kind of routes to expect, right? They're not putting in that kind of advanced scouting work to go in and try and take advantage of every possible mismatch and matchup to win the game. Like, yes, of course, they're trying to win the game, but they're not taking a regular season level approach. And so it's not necessarily then indicative of, say, these two teams played in the regular season. I think it would look a lot different. I'm not saying that the score would be totally different. Like, the Chiefs are obviously the better football team, but, like, the approach from both teams would actually be quite a bit different. So you might say, well, okay, well, if they're not really, like, game planning, then that's just a talent thing. Clearly the Bears are way behind the Chiefs in talent. And I think, first of all, like, yeah, I mean, is anybody arguing the Bears have more talent than the Chiefs? They got Patrick Mahomes under center. They should be the better team. But also, the Bears, especially on defense, were missing some key players in here, like, and really across the board, right? Like, of course, Joe Thuney, not there on the offensive line. You're missing 3 of your top 4 running backs. You don't have Grady Jarrett in there on the defensive line. You're rotating some other guys in there. You're certainly not playing, Montez Sweat a full starter's reps of snaps. You don't have Tremaine Edmonds out there at linebacker. And you don't have your number 1 cornerback, Jalen Johnson, out there either. You also don't have, Terrell Smith. You don't have Kyler Gordon. Like, you're missing super important key players on defense. That is not the sole reason why you got smoked by Patrick Mahomes up and down the field. But when you combine these ideas all together and say, okay, they weren't really game planning for them. They were missing a bunch of really key talented players. And also you can just have bad games on that. All of a sudden it's like, yeah, okay, that that kind of makes some sense here. Like, this isn't necessarily, it's not a good thing, right? And I'm not trying to say it's nothing to worry about, no big, like nothing to, that we should ignore it and pretend everything's fine. But also we can be realistic about, like, yeah, actually there's some reasons that help explain why it was so bad, right? Like, not that it makes it okay or that it, that it is better all of a sudden, but like, at least if we understand why, it doesn't have to be so ominous and scary and be like, uh-oh, everything is wrong. It's like, no, what's wrong is you're missing these guys and you're not game planning, and the Chiefs are also a really good team. And so, yeah, when you got Patrick Mahomes throwing against some backup corners, some backup linebackers, and not a full-strength defensive line by any means, you might run into some real trouble there. Also, just in terms of the Patrick Mahomes thing, like, they're not game planning for each other, but Patrick Mahomes is smart enough to look at this game and see a few snaps and go, hey, wait a minute, this Dennis Allen guy, I've played him before, he's going to play a lot of man coverage. Let's just run some routes that are good against man coverage. And they ran a bunch of man beaters in this game. And it wasn't like a game plan as it is just like a live updating where it's like, yeah, okay, I see what they're doing, and now I'm going to do something different to beat that because we're playing a game. I'm still trying to win, right? It wasn't about preparation. It was like, oh, wait a minute, I can just throw the crossing route here and get open, or throw the one-on-one jump ball in the end zone, and I trust my guy to go get it. Like, some of that stuff is just like Patrick Mahomes knowing what to do and knowing how to beat a team. And then I think from the Bears' offensive standpoint, like, right, there's the obvious, like, getting set and operational stuff that's a real concern, right? The fact that they have a false start on the second play, the fact that there's a bad timing fumble on the first play, like, those are real concerns for me. But then once we acknowledge those are real concerns, I'm not going to be worried when the Bears get 2nd and 19 and can't convert and they have to punt. Like, yeah, okay, most offenses go from 1st and 10 to 2nd and 19 and aren't able to move the chains. And credit to Caleb on 3rd down. He made it like 4th and medium there. He got a good, 8-9 yards on his 3rd down throw. He found something. Like, he got something going there. But, like, okay, I'm not going to panic. And you also look at, like, how the Bears approach this game on offense, especially from Caleb's perspective. A lot of handoffs with the starting offense. They wanted to get DeAndre Swift some real run there. And they even brought in Britton Brown as the number 2 running back with the offense here. But, like, you look at some of the first couple of drives, right? Of course, the first drive you end up throwing because you get knocked back by the penalties. But then, on the second drive of the game, it's run, pass, run, and then sack, and then, you end up punting after that. But, like, some of these drives, against the Bills, they came out and was like, throw, Caleb in rhythm, on time, deliver, and get things rolling. With this game, it was like, no, we're going to hand the ball off. Even on the next couple drives, right? The 3rd drive, it goes run, pass, run, right out of the gate. Like, both drives started with 4 out of 5 plays as running plays. It was not necessarily as intentional about getting Caleb Williams into rhythm. They wanted to get the running game going and get DeAndre Swift those carries, and then they could get him out of the game and not really use him anymore. I think that was a little bit more intentional by the Bears, as opposed to, like, game planning specifically to beat the Chiefs, right? Are they doing 100% what's best to win, or 100% what they just wanted to get out of the game, regardless of win or loss? Like, that to me was a little bit more of what the approach against the Chiefs felt like, at least with the starters out there early on. So it wasn't like the Bears are giving the Chiefs their best punch and, wow, they just got nothing. It was like, oh no, they wanted to run the ball. They wanted to try some different things. And obviously there were mistakes along the way that are real concerns, but it's a little bit different than, like, game where they game planned and still couldn't get anything going. Like, that's a different level of panic at that point. Because I thought generally DeAndre Swift did run pretty well, which was encouraging to see. And as the game went on, I thought we saw better anticipation from Caleb Williams. Still held on to the ball too long, still had operational mistakes, but, like, there were a couple throws where he, like, got rid of the ball as the receiver was breaking open on his routes, like speeding things up a little bit from where he was last year. It was not all bad from Caleb Williams in that regard. And so I'm, again, like, little less on the panic, little less on the overreaction. Not saying everything's great, everything's whatever, but, like, doesn't have to be the end of the world. And I think, 2 months from now, we will forget what the Bears did against the Bills and what they did against the Chiefs. These preseason games will not matter in anybody's mind in really a month. When the Bears are 4 games this season entering the bye week, we will not look back and say, oh, well, they were so bad against the Chiefs, we should have known that they'd be 2-2 into the bye, or whatever the record is, right? I don't think it's ultimately going to matter all that much. But the game will matter for this Bears final 53-man roster cut down. The deadline is Tuesday afternoon. On tomorrow's podcast, we're going to do a full 53-man roster prediction, but I still want to take a look at some of the things specific to this game that I think should have a big influence on what this final 53-man roster looks like tomorrow. Next on Locked On Bears. This episode of Locked On Bears is presented by Yahoo Fantasy. The NFL season is right around the corner, and you can feel the buzz. Fantasy football season is here. Everyone's researching, drafting, and building their championship squads. So if you haven't joined a league yet, now's the time, and it's all happening on Yahoo Fantasy. I play fantasy football on Yahoo Fantasy, and you should too, whether you're a first-timer or a veteran creating your millionth league. With the season kicking off on September 4th, now's the time to start playing Yahoo Fantasy Football because they're offering so many fun ways to compete. If you want more new ways to play, you can try the brand new Yahoo Fantasy Guillotine League mode, where each week the lowest scoring team gets eliminated until one team is left standing. Or if you want to play instantly with friends, you can try the new Draft with Friends mode. Prefer the classics? Get your crew together and go head-to-head in a private league. No crew? No problem. Join a public league for the easiest way to play. The NFL season kicks off September 4th, so don't wait. Start your league now. Draft now at yahoofantasy.com/lockedonnfl. That's yahoofantasy.com/lockedonnfl. So this third preseason game isn't going to be the end-all, be-all of the Bears' 53-man roster, right? All of training camp practices in the first two preseason games will probably in their totality outweigh the third preseason game. But we talked about it in the preview for this game. It was kind of the last chance for some of the key veterans on the bubble, and I'm not sure any of them saved their jobs. If anything, it felt like instead of being their last chance, it turned into the final nail in the coffin for a few guys that were on the bubble, but there were also a couple other young guys I thought that really stood out that may have played their way on to the team. So like, for example, Zach Pickens, defensive tackle, third-round pick. I'm not ready to officially, formally declare it, but I think he's toast. I really feels like I'll put my official prediction stance on tomorrow's podcast once I get a chance to really kind of more formally sit down and look through the full 53 in a really intentional way. But like 3 preseason games of not much to write home about. Well, everyone else, not everyone else, but like, well, somebody like Chris Williams at his own position had a great preseason. It really feels to me like unless Shamar Turner ends up on injured reserve for some reason, Pickens is probably going to be cut. And maybe by the time you hear this podcast, Pickens will have already been cut. And that's tough. That sucks for everybody involved. For Ryan Poles, for Zach Pickens, for us, for the race and third-round pick. Like, nobody wins when Zach Pickens gets cut. But that feels to me like something that's fairly inevitable. But another injury to watch in that conversation is Austin Booker, who's apparently going to miss a little bit of time at least with an injury now. And so could he start the year on short-term injured reserve? And what does that mean for the rest of the defensive line? Because like Dominic Robinson was clearly next on the depth chart. And so if Booker goes on IR, your top 4 defensive ends then would be Sweat, Odengbo, Tano Passanio, and then Dom Robinson would be 4, and then Daniel Hardy is number 5 there in terms of who is getting on the field on defense in the preseason. But Daniel Hardy is a pretty core ace special teams player for Richard Hightower. And against the Chiefs, he had that big strip sack of whoever the Chiefs' backup quarterback is. Was it Gardner Minshew? I think it was Gardner Minshew. I don't remember who the quarterback was in the game at that point. It might have been the Chris Olodokun, their third or fourth string quarterback. But regardless, like Ben Johnson called out Daniel Hardy by name in the post-game press conference as far as somebody who really impressed him. And so when he's already a great special teams player and he makes a big play on defense, that feels like a player who might have played his way onto the 53-man roster. Now, does that mean does he play on as the 5th defensive end? If Austin Booker goes to injured reserve, then you keep Dom Robinson and Daniel Hardy? Or if Austin Booker doesn't go on injured reserve, he's number 4, then does Daniel Hardy make it as 5 and you cut Dominic Robinson? Like, that to me is an interesting merry-go-round of defensive linemen that's going to be interesting because Daniel Hardy in this game only played 6 snaps on defense. He had the big strip sack, had a nice, a splash play, but it wasn't like he's getting a bunch of run and dominating for a full half of the preseason game. It was kind of a limited sample size. So that one is going to be kind of interesting to me, how that one of the harder spots to actually sort of predict and play out in this one. Somebody who played well, though, and I think probably secured their 53-man roster spot. How about the other line, the offensive line? Luke Newman once again started at left guard for Joe Thuney. He plays really good. I mean, for a 6th-round rookie, he played well. He looked like, I don't want to say a starting caliber guard. I mean, a low-end starting caliber guard, right? He didn't look like he deserved to be a starter in this Bears offensive line, but he looked like someone who belonged. And for a 6th-round rookie who was mostly at a small school for most of his college and then 1 year at Michigan State, I was really impressed by Luke Newman. He looked too good to release and try and stash on the practice squad. And that's a really high threshold to get, but like it's going to be hard to keep Luke Newman off the team. And if Luke Newman's going to make the team, that creates some similar question marks on the offensive line where it's like, okay, how many of these guys are you going to keep? Because we know who the 5 starters are. Plus, as your backups, you're keeping Ozzie Trapillo for sure as a swing tackle. You're keeping Ryan Bates as your backup center. And then, so that's 7. And then presumably Luke Newman just played his way on the roster. That would be probably 8. You drafted Karan Amagaji in the 3rd round last year, so you're not going to cut him after 1 year, are you? I mean, maybe, but are you? So that would make him number 9. And then Theo Benedict's played well this preseason, but I still think, I think Luke Newman's emergence has taken Theo Benedict's roster spot more than anywhere else. I do think Theo probably ends up on the practice squad, but we'll see how the numbers shake out. They could keep 10 offensive linemen if they actually wanted to. But Newman, I think, solidified like he's not going to be a guy to stash on the practice squad. He's a guy who will be one of their top options to be a backup guard off the bench this season, and maybe the first name they go to when a center is not needed at that stage. A couple other names to keep an eye on here. Maybe the other big name that is going to be controversial is wide receiver Jahdae Walker, who again had the game-winning touchdown pass and has made big catches in every preseason game. But I will again insist, Walker's spot on the roster is not really affected by the touchdown catch in the 4th quarter of the preseason game. He's not making this team based on what he does on offense. He's making this team based on what he does on special teams. And honestly, in this game, he may have made the team on special teams. Like that's the full circle part of this. Is like I don't want to say ignore the offensive part, but kind of ignore the offensive part and just look at special teams. And like he had a bigger special teams role in this game than Tyler Scott. He had a special teams tackle and a missed tackle on special teams. Jahdae Walker did. Scott didn't have any, and Walker was on all 4 phases. Scott was on like 2 of them. Like this to me looked like Walker surpassing Scott, at least from a special team standpoint on the depth chart. And so the question for me then becomes, do they keep 5 or 6 wide receivers? Because if they keep 5, it's more Odunze, Zacchaeus, Duvernay, Burden. If they keep 6, Jahdae Walker could be that 6 because of what he's done on special teams, more so than the great plays he's made on offense, which are a bonus at this point. But I think he's out special teamed Tyler Scott, and it feels like Scott's shot at the 53 may have slipped through his fingers. So we could see a couple of recent Bears draft picks cut ahead of roster cutdown day in Tyler Scott and Zach Pickens. And if Amagaji goes too, that's really a rough look for the general manager. And I just wonder, even from an optics standpoint, if we might not just see Ryan Poles hold on to Amagaji just because you're cutting 2 of your other draft picks. And I realize like you shouldn't make decisions based on perception and politics and stuff, but also like at some point you got to save some face here and maybe hold on to a draft pick just because you don't want to give up on him just yet too quickly. And we'll see exactly how things play out in that regard. But we're going to have a lot of 53-man roster discussion to have on tomorrow's Locked On Bears podcast. So make sure you hit the subscribe button on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts, because that's going to be the best way to keep up with all of our daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. Thanks for making Locked On Bears your first listen today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. If you're looking for a second listen today, go find the Locked On Fantasy Football podcast with hosts Vinny Iyer and Michelle Madjuk. They help you prep for your fantasy draft and become the most informed manager so you can take home your league's trophy this season. Find Locked On Fantasy Football on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Then come on back tomorrow. Make Locked On Bears your first listen once again for another opportunity to bear down.